This Labour government has been absolutely groundbreaking. The first administration in history with no honeymoon period whatsoever. The election in July was like tying the knot with the love of your life, only to have an almighty row on your way to the reception. Even on your wedding night, when romance should be running high, all you're going to get is shafted. We haven't had, have we, a single moment of excitement about Prime Minister Starmer, who remarkably entered number 10 with negative poll ratings. One detects among the public a weary acceptance that things are probably going to get a whole lot worse under Labour, like when your divorced mother introduces you to her new boyfriend. Since Labour came into office, well-paid train drivers get an inflation-busting pay rise, whilst low-income pensioners are being thrown under the bus or under the unheated radiator with the stripping of their winter fuel allowance and with the rumoured axing of critical infrastructure on the way. This is all because of Labour's well-publicised financial black hole, which, in a magic trick that would impress even Paul Daniels, disappears completely when they're negotiating with the trade unions. Under this new administration, if you're worried about high rates of immigration, you're far right. And Starmer's authoritarian smoking ban, having us arrested if we light up a Lambert and Butler in a Wetherspoons car park, and proposed taxes on sugar and salt, suggests that this government is waging war on fun. I'm not sure they even want to be liked. This is a government that's trolling its own voters. By the way, I'm not too worried about being punished for smoking in a beer garden because most of us will be in jail already, having sent an unkind tweet or Facebook post, with Myra Hindley, Fred West and Hannibal Lecter released from jail early to make space for us. The punishment beating of the Tories in July of this year may have felt satisfying, a bit like the spontaneous purchase of a Greggs sausage roll, but regret soon follows. Labour is already mired in sleaze allegations as a major Labour donor is given an access all areas pass to number 10. And apparently some of the £500,000 that he donated to the party went on a new wardrobe for Sir Keir Starmer. What did he buy? The Emperor's new clothes, by the looks of it. Ed Miliband bets the house on flaky renewables, and the next generation of school leavers are going to be a right bunch of thickos, as Bridget Phillipson looks set to bow to the teaching unions, you know, those geniuses who pushed for school closures during COVID, by scaling back the learning of times tables and grammar in primary school. Oh, and you won't want to know whether that school is good or not good anymore, and you won't be allowed to know with the scrapping of the Ofsted one-word review. One thing is clear, this new government is not outstanding or adequate. In fact, it's only been a few months, and I think it should be placed in special measures. Look at the ham-fisted Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who burned his bridges with Donald Trump years ago, presumably thinking no one would be mad enough to ever make him Foreign Secretary. And now, with characteristically immaculate timing, he puts Israel on the naughty step by stripping them of weapons licenses to placate extremists in his own party. A great look, that, stripping Israel of their weapons as they seek to prevent another October the 7th, and in the same week as they bury 6 recently murdered hostages. This is shaping up to be the most unpopular government ever, and potentially the last Labour government in history. The problem is, once they leave power, will there be a country left to rebuild? Reaction now from tonight's top panel. That's right, my Friday A-team. Alex Dyke, Peter Edwards and Reem Ibrahim. Listen, Peter, great to have you in the studio. Relaxing in a T-shirt there, ignoring the cold weather that's upon us. Let's talk about Keir Starmer. A very unpopular Prime Minister, no honeymoon period, probably the last Labour government ever.
No honeymoon period. I'm going to skip over some of the jokes about murderers in your monologue, which weren't really for me. We all knew Labour would have a dismal inheritance, so why is that, after 14 years of a Conservative government, that so much would be going wrong? I think Labour kept saying to the public, if we win, there will be no honeymoon period. That's what we're seeing now. We see it in a prisons crisis. We see it in the NHS under more pressure. Cost of living is still very high. There isn't enough time. If you invited me to stay till midnight, I couldn't correct all the things that were wrong in your monologue. But to just take one, train drivers, for example. Train drivers are still worse off because you'll understand
£69,000.
the cumulative impact of inflation. And in real terms, they haven't had pay restoration.
£69,000? I'm sorry, but that's a huge amount of money. And the fact of the matter is, those particular people that are striking, that end up resulting in huge amounts of public sector pressures, and indeed many people that are unable to go to work as a result, I don't feel sorry for anybody that's on 60.
Well, Reem, trains are in the private sector. They're not run in the public sector.
But what's more important, for example, if politics is about tough choices, is it pensioners keeping warm in the winter or a pay rise for train drivers who are already relatively handsomely rewarded?
Well, Mark, you remember how much the deficit is this year? £87 billion. So do we want to carry on spending £87 billion that doesn't exist, or do we want to make cuts? And the key thing, and Labour have got a lot of work to do on the winter fuel allowance, but that is the cut is a scheme to take money from middle-class people, and it's not a scheme to take money from poorer people. And it's vital that pension credit, where take-up is only about 2/3, is increased. And that's why there's a campaign to get the poorest people to access pension credit so they can be kept warm.
Alex Dyke, could this be the last Labour government ever?
I don't think so, Mark. You know when those ribbons come up on GB News saying who you are and what you do? I think mine comes up TV presenter and broadcaster. But I see myself as a man on the street.
Yes.
Man of the people. And in the last 3 weeks, I've been doing up a property. And I've been meeting lots of builders and chippies and carpenters and delivery guys. I've been to builder centres. I've been hanging out with the backbone of Britain.
Yeah.
And they are all talking about Keir Starmer putting his foot in it. And a lot of the builders have actually offered to come and try and fill the big hole that he's digging for himself.
Right.
Because he just seems to be so out of step with Britain. And something has to be done about it. The number one thing that everybody I speak to is chatting about is immigration. And he's not hearing us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, isn't it? 8,000 people have entered the country illegally since he became Prime Minister. He wants to smash the gangs. How's that working out, Reem?
Well, I've got to say, I don't think it was all necessarily because of Keir Starmer being in number 10. I do think that a lot of
Well, he immediately scrapped Rwanda, didn't he?
He did immediately scrap Rwanda, which obviously had an impact, but a lot of it is to do with the weather. When the weather is warmer, more people are able to cross the channel. We already knew that the increase in illegal migrants was going to happen. What I would say is that one thing that the Labour government is getting right, I think, is housing. And I think that the housing crisis is the most important issue facing young people, facing this generation.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, the Conservatives have entirely failed at solving that crisis. They sort of promised and empty promises and they scrapped housing targets. At least this government is taking the housing crisis seriously. However, you're absolutely right. I mean, Peter mentioned the fact that debt is incredibly high. We spend huge amounts of money. I think that what is quite unfair is that Keir Starmer and indeed Rachel Reeves before the election promised no tax rise on working people. That's an entire fantasy. You cannot have tax increases without hurting working people. Corporation tax, capital gains tax, VAT, it all hurts working people. No matter where you are, it will hurt them.
Why has Labour not had a political honeymoon, which is absolutely unprecedented? And why did Keir Starmer, Peter, enter number 10 with negative poll ratings?
I think the country are knackered. We've had COVID and all the controversy and debate around that, as well as very serious ill health and death. We've had a cost of living crisis, and this is not to make a partisan point, but public faith in politics is low. There have been scandals in several governments. And Keir Starmer has always been clear, despite the fact he was a lawyer from, well, not from North London, but lived in North London, he's not Tony Blair, and his slightly sober, downbeat style is kind of what got him over the finishing line. Remember, that was with quite a majority, but he's making clear that he's not, a young guy with a guitar like Tony Blair.
The Tories have made a Horlicks of the country. You've been working hard for a long time for a Labour government. You got what you wanted. Are you not concerned at how unpopular they are?
I paused, which kind of showed I must be concerned for a bit. I think if you look at governments, there's nearly always a bit of a dip in popularity after election.
Is Starmer getting the politics of this wrong?
I don't think it matters at this stage. And cast your mind back, when I worked for a shadow cabinet minister 10 years ago, Ed Miliband was frequently ahead of David Cameron. At the time, we had the deepest spending cuts for half a century. And David Cameron really strolled to general election victory in 2015. The slump now in the polls doesn't matter.
Isn't Keir Starmer's problem that I've no doubt he's very intelligent, hard-working, diligent.
His father was a toolmaker.
His father was a toolmaker, and actually that gets me around to what I'm saying. He doesn't read the room. He didn't get the laughter in the room on that live broadcast, did he?
Yeah.
It's kind of like you could do that, and there's not that much behind there.
But I think Peter is right in that the reason why Keir Starmer won is because he wasn't the Tories. In that respect, he is a bit more sober, he's a little bit more mellow, and actually that kind of boring character is what the country effectively ended up wanting.
Perhaps it was time for a Labour government, Reem, but have Labour got the wrong Prime Minister in Keir Starmer?
Well, what I think is interesting is, with regard to the personalities and actually the communications around it, the month of August, where Parliament was in recess, they should have been coming out with all of these great stories about their plans for GB Energy and that kind of thing. And actually that wasn't the case at all. The headlines were these scandals with regard to their Labour donors and whether or not they had passes at number 10, and actually huge numbers of the fact that they're going to increase tax on working people. That speech, again, I mean, the comms of it was actually quite terrible. Even if you forget about the policy, which I disagree with, but the comms of this Labour government is not very good.
Briefly, will Keir Starmer ever be popular? Will he ever be loved by the British people?
I think he will be, and I'll give you one quick reason why. In the last 49 years, only 2 Labour leaders have won a general election. One was called Tony Blair and one was Keir Starmer. And we're acting like he's, just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
There you go. Well, look, I've been described as that more than once. My thanks to Alex Dyke, Peter Edwards and Reem Ibrahim, who return